A detective who failed to solve a family's murder case adopted their only surviving nonverbal daughter. 10 years later, she picked up a pencil for the first time and drew a face. And when the detective looked closely at the drawing, he froze in horror. The evening settled over Riverwood, Georgia, slowly and reluctantly, like an old man shuffling down a dusty road. Elijah Eli Hayes stood by the window of his bachelor apartment, watching the first streetlights flick on, snatching the wet asphalt and the bare branches of the oak trees from the twilight. 10 years. An eternity woven from solitary evenings, bureaucratic reports, and one single case that sat like a splinter beneath his heart, poisoning every single day. 10 years ago, at 35, he was a decorated detective in the Major Crimes Unit. He'd crossed the threshold of a house where the air was thick with the smell of blood and unspoken horror. The Jennings family, a husband, a wife, and their young son, had been murdered with a brutality that shook even seasoned officers. And in the nursery, beneath the bed, he found her, a 5-year-old girl with the eyes of an old woman. Eyes where the entire nightmare of that night was frozen solid. She didn't cry, she didn't scream, she just stared right through him, as if her soul had left her small body, leaving behind only an empty shell. Her name was Maya. From that day on, Maya never spoke a word. Doctors diagnosed her with selective mutism, a silence caused by profound psychological trauma. The killer was never found. The case was filed away, a thick binder stamped unsolved, becoming Eli's personal failure and his eternal torment. The girl had no known relatives, and the alternative was a foster care system, an impersonal institution capable of finally crushing an already wounded soul. And so, Eli, childless and recently divorced, did what no one expected. He adopted her. His wife, Chandra, had left a year earlier, worn out by his endless hours and his obsession with work. "You're married to your cold cases, Eli," she'd thrown at him as she walked out. And now, this silent child had entered his life, a living reminder of his biggest failure. "Maya, dinner time," he called, not turning around. Quiet footsteps behind him. He turned. 15-year-old Maya, thin, fragile, with those same huge, sad eyes, stood in the kitchen doorway. She had grown over the years, but her gaze remained the same, the look of a child who had stared into the abyss. She silently sat at the table, carefully pulling her plate of leftover stew closer. Their communication was made up of gestures, glances, and short notes stuck to the fridge. He was accustomed to the silence, learning to understand her without words. But every day, his heart ached with yearning. He would have given anything just to hear her voice again. After dinner, when Maya went to her room, Eli took the old file from his safe, the crime scene photos, the interrogation transcripts, the expert reports. He knew the case by heart, every fact, every detail. Again and again, he looked into the faces of the victims, young, happy, with futures that had been so cruelly stolen. What did I miss? He had asked himself that question 1,000 times. What didn't I see that night? He put the file down and wearily rubbed his temples. Tomorrow, she would turn 15. He had thought long and hard about what to give her. Dolls and dresses held no interest. She read books, but without much enthusiasm. Her world was locked, and he didn't know how to find the key. The next day after work, he stopped by an art supply store. Not knowing why, he bought a large set of professional pencils, watercolor paints, and a stack of thick drawing paper. Maybe this will help her externalize what's inside, he thought, without much hope. That evening, he offered her the gift. Maya stared at the bright box for a long time, then slowly, almost reverently, ran her fingers over the smooth surface. She lifted her gaze to him, and for the first time in 10 years, Eli thought he saw not just the reflection of the lamp in her eyes, but a tiny spark of genuine interest. She took the gift and silently retreated to her room. Eli didn't disturb her. He sat back down, reopening the cursed case. But his thoughts weren't there. They were behind the thin wall, in the room where a silent girl held colored pencils, his only hope that the ice in her soul would finally begin to thaw. The first week passed in the usual silence. Maya didn't touch the gift. The box of pencils remained on her desk, unopened, like a silent accusation. Eli began to regret his impulsive purchase, deciding he had been wrong again, missed the mark again, failed to understand. He chastised himself for his helplessness, for the fact that in 10 years he still hadn't been able to break through the wall his adopted daughter had built around herself. He had given her a home, care, and safety, but he couldn't give her the main thing, healing. Sometimes at night, he would hear her quietly crying in her room. Those stifled sobs tore his soul to shreds. He would stand by her door, clenching his fists, fighting the urge to rush in, hold her, and shield her from the ghosts of the past. But he knew it was useless. Her pain was too deep, too intimate to be comforted by simple words or hugs. Then, one rainy Sunday, as gray clouds heavily blanketed the sky and the city slipped into sleepy melancholy, he heard a strange sound from her room, a quiet, barely perceptible scratching, like the rustling of dry leaves. He cautiously pushed the door open. Maya was sitting on the floor, surrounded by sheets of paper. In her hand, she held a black pencil, and with focused, almost fierce intensity, she dragged it across the page. She wasn't drawing in the usual sense of the word. She was pouring out the chaos inside her soul. Sharp, jagged lines crossed at impossible angles, creating a tangled knot of darkness, a whirlwind of despair. Eli froze in the doorway, afraid to disturb this fragile moment. For the first time in 10 years, she had found a way to speak. That evening, after Maya was asleep, he gathered the sheets scattered across the floor. Dozens of drawings, all resembling each other like drops of dirty water, black spirals, sharp corners, thick, heavily scored lines that nearly tore through the paper. There were no images, no subject matter, only pure, concentrated pain. He felt a lump rise in his throat. This was more terrifying than any crime scene photograph. This was a snapshot of her soul, torn, tormented, screaming without sound. The next day, he met with his best friend, Devin "Dev" Sterling. They had been friends since the academy, started work together in the major crimes unit, and worked the toughest cases. Dev was Eli's complete opposite, easygoing, sociable, always with a smile. He was one of the few who had supported Eli's decision to adopt Maya. They sat in a small coffee shop downtown. Outside the window, people hurried about their business. Students laughed, couples cooed. Just ordinary life, which seemed so distant to Eli. Look, Eli pulled a few of Maya's drawings from his briefcase. She started drawing. Dev took the sheets and examined them carefully. Well, that's progress, he said encouragingly. Expression of emotion. Art therapy. I hear the shrinks say it helps. You think they're just scribbles? Eli stared intently at his friend. What else? Dev shrugged. Just typical childhood fears poured onto paper. Don't look for what isn't there, old man. You're still too hung up on this case. Let it go. It's been 10 years. I can't, Eli quietly replied. Until I find the person who did this, I won't rest. He took the drawings back and started examining them again. His gaze swept over the chaotic lines, trying to grasp some meaning, some clue. And suddenly, he froze. On one of the sheets, amidst the black tangle of strokes, he noticed a detail he hadn't seen before. A thin curved line drawn with particular pressure. It was repeated in another drawing, and a third. Almost unnoticeable, yet insistent, like a whisper in the silence. It looked like a scar, a crooked, jagged scar crossing something that wasn't yet fully formed on the paper. Eli felt a chill run down his spine. He looked up at Dev, who was carelessly stirring sugar into his coffee. No, this is crazy. Just my imagination running wild. He'd been looking at these drawings too long. He put the sheets back in the file, trying to dismiss the insistent thought. But that curved line, that phantom scar, had already snagged his consciousness, planting the first seed of a terrible suspicion, the true meaning of which he did not yet know. Another week passed, and Maya's drawings began to change. The chaos gradually gave way to forms, distorted and frightening perhaps, but recognizable. Outlines of a house appeared on the pages, the same one with the high porch and 3 windows on the facade. The house was drawn in black, as if charred from the inside. Next to it were trees with bare, twisted branches, like bony hands reaching for the sky. And looming over everything was a huge, formless shadow, a dark stain that seemed to radiate cold. The shadow was always near the house. Sometimes it obscured it completely. Sometimes it just touched the roof. But it was present in every drawing, an inescapable threat. Eli knew he needed a specialist. His own knowledge and fatherly love were not enough to decipher these messages from the depths of traumatized memory. He found the best child psychologist in Riverwood, Dr. Evelyn Reed, a black woman in her 50s with a gentle voice and strikingly insightful eyes. Her office, located in an old building on a quiet side street, felt more like a cozy living room than a clinic. Soft armchairs, ceiling-high bookshelves, the smell of herbal tea. "This is a very good sign, Detective Hayes," Dr. Reed said, carefully examining the drawings he had spread on the low table. "Maya has found a way to speak to the world. Her subconscious is searching for an outlet for the horror she experienced. These drawings are her language." "But what do they mean? The house, the shadow?" Eli leaned forward. "The house is a symbol of safety that was destroyed," the psychologist slowly explained. "It is her lost paradise. And the shadow? The shadow is the embodiment of her fear, her pain. It could be both the image of the event itself and the image of the one who committed it." "Do you think it's a portrait of the killer?" Eli's heart beat faster. "Not literally," Dr. Reed carefully corrected. "For a 5-year-old child, the criminal is not a specific face, but something terrifying, dark, all-consuming. It could be just a shadow. We need to work with this image, help her stop being afraid of it, perhaps even give it a name to separate it from herself." Dr. Reed agreed to work with Maya. The first few sessions were conducted in complete silence. Maya sat in the armchair, staring at a single spot, while Dr. Reed spoke quietly to her, told her stories, and read poetry. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to invade her world, but simply created a safe space where the girl could feel protected. Eli waited in the corridor, pacing the old wooden floor, feeling more helpless than ever. He, a detective accustomed to acting, interrogating, and analyzing facts, could now only passively observe, entrusting the most precious thing he had to another person. During the third session, Dr. Reed suggested Maya draw right there in the office. The girl initially refused, shaking her head, but then took a pencil and drew the same picture: the black house, the gnarled trees, and the ominous shadow. "Is she scary?" the psychologist gently asked, pointing to the shadow. Maya nodded. "And what does she want?" The girl thought for a moment, then drew a small figure of a girl, herself, next to the shadow, and crossed it out with a thick line. "She wants you gone," Dr. Reed clarified. Maya nodded again, and a single tear rolled down her cheek. That evening, recounting this to Eli, the psychologist looked troubled. "She is convinced that the killer came for her, that she was his target. This explains why she's so afraid, why she's silent. She thinks that if she speaks, he will return and finish what he started. But that's not true, Eli exclaimed. The killer was after money, documents. The kids were just witnesses. Your logical mind understands that, Detective Hayes. But the mind of a 5-year-old girl who witnessed the death of her parents operates by different laws. She lives in constant fear. We need to convince her that she is safe, that you will protect her. From that day on, Eli doubled his efforts. He installed a new, sturdier door on the apartment, even though the old one was strong. He walked Maya to school and met her afterward, even though she had long been walking by herself. He tried to create a cocoon of safety around her, but he felt it wasn't helping. The shadow in her drawings did not disappear. It only grew larger, blacker, as if feeding on their shared fear. The mystery of her silence, of her nightmares, deepened daily. Who was this shadow man who had taken not only her family, but also her voice and peace? And how could he prove to her that the man would never return when he, Eli, wasn't sure of it himself, as long as the killer walked free? The news that Eli was taking Maya to a psychologist quickly reached Dev. He called right away. His voice sounded concerned, almost paternal. Man, I heard you found a doctor for Maya. That's good. But are you sure this is what she needs? Maybe she needs more serious help? What do you mean, serious? Eli tensed up. Well, Dev stammered, choosing his words, I was talking to a professor I know at the regional medical center. He says deep traumas like this are treated in a specialized inpatient facility. Special techniques, medication. These conversations and drawings, they're just half measures, you know? Eli felt irritation rising inside him. Dev, Dr. Reed is an excellent specialist. And there is progress. Maya has started to draw, to express her feelings. That's the thing, she's drawing, Dev countered. She's drawing shadows, scaring herself and you. What if it only makes her condition worse? Did you ever think digging into the past could be dangerous for her mental state? Maybe it's better to leave well enough alone? She's silent, but she's alive. She's healthy. She goes to school. Why wake the devil when he's sleeping? His friend's words, though perhaps well-intentioned, stung Eli. They sounded like a verdict, a suggestion to surrender. To leave well enough alone meant accepting that Maya would forever remain in her silent prison. No, Eli said firmly. I will fight for her until the end. Suit yourself, Dev sighed. I just worry about both of you. You're running yourself ragged. Look at you. Maybe you're the one who needs help. The conversation left an unpleasant taste. Eli couldn't shake the feeling that Dev, perhaps without realizing it, was trying to stop him, as if instinctively sensing that these drawings might lead to something better left unknown. He dismissed the thought as ridiculous. Dev, his only friend, practically a brother, he was just worried. Meanwhile, Dr. Reed, his new and unexpected ally, proposed a different approach. Detective Hayes, Maya needs to feel that she is not alone in this fight, that you are on her side, not just as a protector, but as a comrade. Try drawing with her. I can't draw, Eli confessed, feeling lost. It doesn't matter. The process is what counts. Sit next to her, take a sheet of paper, and draw your fear. My fear? Yes, you have one too. The fear of not succeeding, the fear of not solving that case, the fear for Maya. She feels it. Believe me. Show her that it's okay to be afraid, that even strong adults fear something. That evening, after long hesitation, Eli made up his mind. He sat next to Maya at her small table, took a pencil, and tried to illustrate his fear. It came out clumsy, childlike, a huge black hole pulling tiny human figures into it. As he drew, he felt his internal tension ease, as if he, too, was pouring his old pain onto the paper. Maya watched him silently, her eyes wide. Then she took her own sheet, and next to the menacing shadow, drew another figure, large, bright, with broad shoulders, shielding the small girl. She looked at Eli and timidly pointed her finger, first at the large figure, then at him. "That's me?" he asked, his voice trembling. She nodded. In that moment, he understood that Dr. Reed was right. Their battle was shared, and now he had not only a helper in the wise psychologist, but also a chief ally, his own daughter, who had found a way to show him that he was her defender and her light figure in a world of shadows. Dev, learning of the new method, just shook his head. "You've got to be kidding me. A grown-up detective sitting there drawing scribbles. Watch yourself, Eli. You might get locked up in that clinic right alongside her." His words didn't sting anymore. Eli felt they were on the right track, but Dev's concern was growing more insistent. He started coming over more often, bringing Maya expensive gifts, trying to distract her from drawing, with a trip to the movies or an outing to a new entertainment center. "She needs positive experiences," he told Eli. "You and that psychologist of yours are just picking at old wounds." The conflict was brewing. On one side was Dev, with his pragmatic, if not healthy, approach. On the other, Dr. Reed, with her belief in the healing power of art and the soul. And between them, Eli and Maya, slowly, step by step, making their way through the thicket of the past toward the light. Eli increasingly caught Dev's heavy, scrutinizing gaze. His friend seemed to be trying to read his face, to understand how far they had progressed in their investigation. And in that look, Eli sensed not only worry, but also poorly concealed anxiety, which put him in an even more difficult position, forcing him to doubt the only person he considered his anchor. The feeling that he was missing something important gave Eli no peace. Maya's drawings were becoming more alarming, and Dev's anxiety more obsessive. Guided by intuition, which he had learned to trust more than facts over the years, Eli decided on a desperate move. Late that evening, when the Major Crimes Unit building was deserted, he used his old key card and his knowledge of the corridors to slip into the archive. The air here was stale, smelling of dust and oblivion. Under the dim light of a single bulb, he found the right shelf. Case File 217, The Murder of the Jennings Family. He placed the heavy file on the table and opened it. The familiar photos, protocols, and reports. He had read them hundreds of times, but today he was looking not for what was written, but for what was hidden between the lines. He re-examined the list of physical evidence. Nothing unusual. He had explored every angle: robbery, business rivalry, domestic dispute. All had led to dead ends. The head of the family, Andre Jennings, owned a small construction firm, but he had no serious enemies or debts that were immediately apparent. Eli closed his eyes, trying to reconstruct the scene of that night. The smell of blood, the cold, the glassy eyes of the victims, and the little girl under the bed. Something was wrong. Some detail was missing from the overall picture, but he couldn't grasp which one. He opened the file again, and methodically, page by page, began checking everything from the start. The crime scene description, which he himself had written 10 years ago. The desk in the study was overturned, drawers pulled out. Clearly, someone was looking for something. But what? The safe had been cracked, but the cash lying in plain sight was untouched. So it wasn't about money, documents perhaps. He checked the inventory of seized papers, contracts, bills, accounting reports. Nothing criminal. His team had thoroughly vetted the financial activity of Jennings's firm. Clean. He flipped further. And suddenly, his gaze fixed on a detail in the inspection protocol. A silver cigarette case with the engraving AJ was found on the floor in the study next to the body of Andre Jennings. Inside were 3 cigarettes of a high-end European brand. Eli remembered that case. An expensive, stylish item. But Jennings didn't smoke. Everyone, his wife, friends, colleagues, had confirmed this. Then whose cigarette case was it? 10 years ago, they had investigated this lead, checking all of Jennings's acquaintances, but to no avail. The case remained a blind clue. He put the protocol down and again picked up Maya's drawings he had brought with him. The black house, the shadow, the gnarled trees. He stared at them, trying to find a connection, and then it hit him. He took one of the latest drawings, where the shadow was especially clearly defined, and held it up to the light. In the shadow's hand, in that dark mass, a small rectangular object was discernible. Before, he hadn't paid attention to it, dismissing it as a random detail. But now, knowing about the cigarette case, he saw it clearly. A rectangle with a shiny spot, a glint of light on silver. His heart pounded. It couldn't be a coincidence. A 5-year-old girl, hiding under a bed in a different room, couldn't have seen the cigarette case in her father's study, unless the killer had entered her room after the murder. Unless he had stood over her as she lay, holding her breath in her hiding place. The thought scorched him. He imagined the killer, cigarette case in hand, leaning over the bed, searching for the last witness. And Maya, through the gap between the bed and the floor, seeing his shadow and this shining object in his hand. The blood drained from his face. He felt a surge of nausea. This changed everything. The killer knew there was a child still in the house. He knew, and he didn't touch her. Why? Did he fear the noise? Or could he not bring himself to kill her? He grabbed his phone and dialed Dev's number, forgetting the late hour. "Dev, I'm at the archive," he blurted out, skipping the preamble. "Remember the Jennings case? The cigarette case." "What cigarette case?" Dev mumbled sleepily. "Eli, are you nuts? It's 3 a.m. The silver cigarette case we found by the body. Jennings didn't smoke. Whose was it? We never established that." "Come on, man," Dev yawned. "Could be a gift from someone, or a guest left it. We checked. It was a bust." "No, it wasn't a bust," Eli was practically yelling. "Maya drew it. She saw it in the killer's hand." A heavy silence hung on the other end of the line. "Eli," Dev finally spoke, his voice serious, almost harsh. "Go home. You're exhausted. Those drawings are driving you crazy. This is dangerous. Leave the case alone before you do something stupid." He hung up. Eli sat in the silence of the archive, listening to the dial tone. Dev's reaction was strange. Instead of being intrigued by a new lead, he was trying to stop him. Why? Why was he so afraid of Eli digging into this case again? The search had led him to a new, even more disturbing question, but the answer was hidden in a darkness as thick and impenetrable as the shadow in his silent daughter's drawings. Something subtle changed in Dev's behavior after that night call. His friendly concern took on a shade of obsessive control. He called Eli several times a day, asking about Maya's health, the therapy sessions, and the drawings. Beneath the mask of involvement, Eli felt the cold, scrutinizing attention of a predator studying his prey. Dev seemed to be trying to anticipate his every move, to guess where his makeshift investigation would lead. "You look terrible," he'd say during their encounters, peering sympathetically into his eyes. "Maybe you should take a vacation. Get some rest. Clear your head? I can arrange everything. A trip to a nice resort." "I don't have time for a vacation," Eli answered dryly, pulling away from the hugs that now felt sticky and fake. One day, returning to his office after a meeting, Eli found that Maya's file of drawings, which he always kept in his desk drawer, was missing. He searched everything, checked the safe and the cabinets. The file was gone. His heart plummeted. Those drawings were his only thread, his only hope. He rushed to Dev. "Did you see my blue file, the one with Maya's drawings?" Dev threw up his hands. Sincere bewilderment was written on his face. "No idea, man. What was in it? Maybe the cleaning crew threw it out by mistake. You know how they don't exactly handle things with care. But Eli didn't believe him. He saw the flicker of triumph in his friend's eyes for a fraction of a second. He understood. It wasn't an accident. It was a planned diversion. Dev was trying to deprive him of evidence. The next day, Eli was summoned by his boss, Captain Marcus Thorne, an old-school man who didn't tolerate improvisation. "Hayes, I got a complaint about you," he said, not looking up from the papers. "It's anonymous. They say you're using your adopted daughter, a child with severe psychological trauma, as an instrument to investigate an old cold case. That you're pressuring her, forcing her to recall something that almost killed her." Eli went cold. He recognized the phrasing, almost the exact words Dev had used. "That's a lie, Captain. I'm just trying to help her. Art therapy?" "I'm not a psychologist, Hayes," Thorne cut him off, lifting his heavy gaze. "I'm a detective, and I see you crossing the line. You're obsessed with this case. It broke your career 10 years ago. Do you want it to break your life now?" "But there's new evidence," Eli tried to argue. "The girl is sick," the captain retorted, "and your duty is to heal her, not to use her in your games. I am officially suspending you from any action on the Jennings case. One more complaint, and I will question your fitness for duty and your custody of the child." The last words hit him like a whip. The threat of taking Maya away was the worst thing he could hear. He left the office, stunned and crushed. Dev was waiting for him in the corridor. "Well?" he asked, with poorly concealed sympathy. "You did this, didn't you?" Eli said quietly, looking him straight in the eyes. "You wrote the complaint. Are you out of your mind?" Dev recoiled. "I'm your friend. I'm just trying to save you from yourself. You're drowning, Eli, and you're dragging the kid down with you." He spoke passionately, convincingly, but Eli no longer heard the words. He only saw the cold calculation in the eyes of the man he had considered a brother. He understood. The adversary he had been searching for was right beside him the entire time. Not a shadow in a drawing, but a living, breathing person, tightening the noose around him. The stakes had risen to the maximum. Now not only his career, but also his right to be a father, was under threat. He felt the ground crumbling beneath his feet, felt himself being driven into a corner, deprived of air, deprived of hope. The danger had become real, tangible, and it came from the place he least expected it. That evening, as he sat in the kitchen, trying to collect his thoughts, the phone rang. It was Dr. Reed. "Detective Hayes, I just saw Maya. She drew something new. You need to see this." He rushed to her office within half an hour. The psychologist met him at the door. Her face was serious. "She's waiting for you." Maya was sitting at a table in Dr. Reed's office. A sheet of paper lay before her. She hadn't drawn a shadow or a black house. She had drawn a car, a black, shiny luxury SUV, the kind many successful people drove back then. And behind the wheel, a dark silhouette of a person. "What does it mean?" Eli whispered. "I think she remembered how the killer arrived or left," the psychologist replied. "It's a major breakthrough. Her memory is coming back." But Eli wasn't looking at the drawing. He was looking at a tiny detail in the corner of the sheet, a license plate. With childlike simplicity, Maya had tried to reproduce the numbers and letters that had apparently been imprinted in her memory. The plate was blurred and smudged, but one letter and two numbers were clearly legible. J77. Eli felt an icy wave wash over his body. He remembered that combination. 10 years ago, his best friend, Dev Sterling, had a customized license plate with those very details. This was a direct collision with the truth. Terrible, unthinkable, but inevitable. Eli's world shattered into pieces. The thought that Dev, his closest friend, The man who was the best man at his wedding, and the godfather to his child, who was never born, could be the monster who murdered the Jennings family, seemed absurd, insane. He tried to find another explanation, a coincidence, a mistake of a child's memory. Maya could have seen Dev's car any other day, and her traumatized consciousness simply wove it into the canvas of the nightmare. He clung to those thoughts like a drowning man to a straw. In desperation, he decided to go all in. He called Dev and, trying to keep his voice as casual as possible, said, "Listen, you were right. I think I really am losing it. I got too hung up on the case. Thorne suspended me, and maybe it's for the best. I want to apologize for my suspicions." "Forget about it, old man." Dev's voice noticeably warmed. "I get it. We're all human. I'm glad you finally came to your senses. Let's meet up. Let's sit down like in the good old days," Eli suggested. "Tomorrow, at the grotto." "Great idea," Dev readily agreed. "It's about time." The grotto was their spot, a small restaurant on the edge of town, where they celebrated promotions, drowned their sorrows over failures, and made plans for the future. Eli hoped that in this familiar setting, over a bottle of bourbon, he could get his friend to talk, find some confirmation, or, conversely, a refutation of his terrible suspicions. He arrived early, taking their favorite corner booth, but Dev never showed up. After an hour of waiting, Eli dialed his number. The phone was off. An hour later, he understood. Dev wasn't coming. It was a trap. His suspicions had been so obvious that his friend simply hadn't fallen for the cheap trick. Humiliated and crushed, he returned home. The apartment was dark and quiet. Maya was gone. A note lay on the kitchen table, written in Dr. Reed's hurried, frightened script. "Detective Hayes, call me urgently." Maya was taken. He dropped the note. His legs gave out. He collapsed into a chair. "Taken? Who? Where?" He dialed the psychologist's number. "Dr. Reed, what happened?" "People from Child Protective Services came." The woman's voice was shaking. "They said they received a report of neglect, that you were exerting psychological pressure on her. They had an official court order. I tried to argue, but they took her to Willow Creek Residential Care." Eli listened, unable to believe his ears. This was a low blow, cunning, calculated, and merciless. Dev had delivered a counterstrike, taking away the most precious thing Eli had. He knew that without Maya, Eli would be broken, disarmed. He rushed to the facility, a government institution behind a high fence, but they wouldn't let him pass the door. "Quarantine," a woman in a white uniform said coldly. "No visitors." "But I'm her father," he shouted, slamming his fist on the metal door. "You have no right." "Calm down, sir, or we'll call the police." He sat on a bench across from the center until late into the night, staring at the illuminated windows, behind one of which was his girl. He had suffered total defeat. He was suspended from work. His daughter was taken from him. He was trapped, and there seemed to be no way out. Maya was right. The shadow had returned. Only now, it wasn't just a shadow in a drawing, but a very real, powerful force destroying his life. In that moment, he felt absolutely devastated. Hope was gone. He was ready to give up, to admit his powerlessness against the evil that proved smarter, craftier, and more ruthless than he was. He sat in the cold autumn rain, feeling as though it wasn't the sky crying, but his own soul mourning everything he had lost. It was the darkest night of his life. The rain lashed his face, mixing with tears Eli no longer tried to hide. He sat on the wet bench, broken and empty. The world had narrowed to the barred windows of the residential care facility where his Maya was confined. He had lost. Dev was stronger, and now all that remained was to wait for the final crushing blow. His phone vibrated in his pocket, an unfamiliar number. He declined the call, then again. On the third time, he irritably answered, "Hello." Is this Detective Elijah Hayes? A quiet, almost elderly voice asked. Yes. Who is this? My name is Mr. Willie Jenkins, and I'm the night guard at the Major Crimes Unit Archive. You don't remember me, but I know you well. You handled the Jennings murder case 10 years ago. Eli tensed up. And you were the only one who spoke to me like a person back then, the old man continued. Everyone else looked at me like I was furniture. But you offered me tea. Said, you've got a tough job, Pop, standing all night. I remembered that. Mr. Jenkins, I don't understand what you're getting at. I saw your friend, Detective Sterling, leaving the archive last night. The guard's voice dropped to a whisper. He was carrying a blue folder under his arm. Looked a lot like the one you brought. I was surprised, him working at night. But today I heard you were in trouble, that you were suspended, and I thought, maybe it's connected. Eli froze, oblivious to the rain and the cold. He stole the file with the drawings, he whispered. I don't know what was in the file, the guard said, but I know he was very nervous, and he dropped something when he left. A small thing. I picked it up, meant to give it back, but he was already gone. Blood pounded in Eli's temples. What did he drop, Mr. Jenkins? What? A cufflink, the old man replied. A silver one with the letter J. A nice silver cufflink with the letter J. Eli remembered it. Dev always wore those cufflinks, a gift from his father. One had an S for Sterling, and the other, the old man said J for Jennings? Andre Jennings. Eli frantically tried to put it together. How could Dev have the victim's cufflink? They had searched everything back then. They hadn't found anything like it. Unless Dev took it off the dead man himself, as a trophy. Mr. Jenkins, where are you right now? Can I come over? I'm at work. Come on over. Half an hour later, Eli was holding a small piece of silver in his hand. The cufflink was exactly like the one he'd seen in a photograph of Andre Jennings. This wasn't just a clue. It was the key, irrefutable proof that Dev was in that house on the night of the murder. But how could he use it? He was suspended. Any attempt to resume the investigation would be seen as disobeying orders. He returned home, still clenching the cold metal in his fist. A message was blinking on the answering machine. It was Dr. Reed. Detective Hayes. I saw Maya. Her condition has worsened. She refuses to eat, won't respond to anyone. But she'd left this for you. He pressed the button, and an image appeared on the phone screen. A new drawing. The last one. Maya had drawn it, apparently on a scrap of paper she found in the center. It was a face. Finally, not a shadow, but a face, distorted with horror, with wide-open eyes. And on the cheek, a crooked, jagged scar. Eli stared at the drawing, and the ground slipped out from under him. It wasn't Dev. The scar was on the other cheek, and the facial features, faintly familiar, were not his friend's. He zoomed in on the image, and then he saw it. On the collar of the man in the drawing was a tiny detail, a cufflink with the letter J. He looked at the face again, and it pierced him. It was the face of Andre Jennings, the victim. Maya had drawn her father. But why? Why the scar on his face? And why was it distorted by such horror? Suddenly, the scattered pieces of the puzzle began to form a single, monstrous picture. Jennings didn't smoke. The cigarette case wasn't his. Dev's cufflink at the crime scene. His friend's strange behavior. His attempts to obstruct the investigation. And this drawing. Maya hadn't drawn the killer. She had drawn the last victim. She saw her father being murdered. But who was the real killer then? The one who was near her father at that moment. The one who had the cigarette case. The one who had the J77 car. He had the key to the mystery in his hands. But that key opened a door to a chasm of betrayal that he couldn't have even conceived of. Shock gave way to icy calm. The fog in his head dissipated, and his thoughts worked with maximum clarity, like a Swiss watch mechanism. He replayed the events of the last few days, the last 10 years, over and over, and everything fell into place. Dev wasn't just hindering him, he was leading him on a false trail. He was planting ideas, sowing doubt, manipulating him like a puppet. The complaint, the suspension, Maya's removal from the home, these were all links in the same chain. Desperate attempts to silence him, to stop him before he got too close to the truth. The truth was simple and monstrous. Dev and Jennings were not just acquaintances, they were partners. In what? Eli didn't know yet, but he was sure it was illegal. The cigarette case that only Dev smoked from. The cufflink that Dev had taken as a souvenir, or dropped in a hurry. And the scar. Where did the scar in the drawing come from? Eli closed his eyes, trying to remember. There was no mention of a scar on Jennings's face in the file, which meant it appeared at the moment of the murder. A blow, a struggle, a father protecting his family. Maya saw everything. She saw not one person, but two. Her father and his killer, her friend, Uncle Dev, who often visited them, who gave her toys. The betrayal that destroyed her world was double. She saw her father's best friend kill him. No wonder her mind had blocked those memories, turning the killer into a faceless shadow, and her father into a mask distorted by horror, with a scar. The realization burned him. The anger he felt was cold as steel. He no longer felt pain or despair, only cold, ringing determination. He had to see this case through. Not for himself, not for his career, but for Maya, for the memory of the Jennings family, for the justice he had almost ceased to believe in. He called Dr. Reed. "I need to see Maya immediately." "That's impossible, Detective Hayes. Quarantine?" "Dr. Reed." His voice was firmer than ever. "Her life depends on this, and not just hers. I know who the killer is." A pause hung on the other end. "I'll figure something out," she finally said. "Be at the back entrance of the center in an hour. You'll have 10 minutes. Then he called Mr. Willie Jenkins, the old guard. "Pop, I need your help. Remember that cufflink. I need you to officially register it as a find. Write a statement to Captain Thorne. Describe where and when you found it. And most importantly, mention that you saw Detective Sterling leaving the archive." "I'll do it, son," the old man replied without hesitation. "It's high time we expose that snake." A plan began to form in his mind. He was no longer the victim. He was becoming the hunter. He had two aces, the cufflink, which would now become official evidence, and the main witness, Maya, whose memory was beginning to wake up. But he had to act fast and carefully. Dev was smart, cunning, and, as Eli now understood, absolutely ruthless. He looked at himself in the mirror. An exhausted, unshaven face, dark circles under his eyes, gray at his temples. But his gaze was different. The confusion was gone. It was replaced by steel. He took his service weapon from the locker, which he hadn't touched since his suspension, and checked the magazine. He wasn't planning on taking justice into his own hands. The weapon was for protection. He felt that the final confrontation was near, and he had to be ready for it. He drove toward the meeting with Maya, and Captain Thorne's words echoed in his head. "You're obsessed." Yes, he was obsessed, not with revenge, but with the thirst for justice. He was heading to the place where the last, most important clue awaited him. A clue that would either definitively confirm his hunch or destroy it, along with the remnants of his faith in people. The back lot of the residential care facility met him with dampness and the smell of decaying leaves. Dr. Reed was waiting by the staff entrance, nervously clutching her shawl. "You don't have much time," she whispered. "The nurse at the desk is my former student. I arranged it, but the rounds will start soon. She led him down a dimly lit corridor to a small playroom. Maya was sitting on a little chair in the corner, her back to the door. She didn't even turn around when he entered. Her slender shoulders were trembling. Eli knelt before her. "Maya, it's me, Pop." She slowly turned her head. Her eyes seemed even larger on her thin face. There was such an abyss of sorrow in them that Eli's breath caught. "I came to take you home," he said, taking her cold hands in his. "Everything will be all right. I promise." He took a photo from his pocket. An old, yellowed snapshot he'd found in the Jennings family album. In it, a young, smiling Andre Jennings was hugging his wife, and standing next to them was Dev. All three were laughing, squinting in the sun. "Maya, look." He carefully held the photo up to her eyes. "Do you remember this man?" He pointed to Dev. She looked at the photo for a long time, and her lips moved silently. Then her gaze shifted to her father's face in the picture. She flinched, and a fine tremor ran through her body. She pulled her hands away and covered her face with her palms. "Shadow," she whispered, barely audible, almost soundlessly. But Eli heard the first word she had spoken in 10 years. "Yes," he said, feeling tears streaming down his cheeks. "It's him, the Shadow." "Detective Hayes, it's time." Dr. Reed's whisper came from behind the door. "Maya," he took her hands again. "I need you to do one more thing. Draw him again. Draw the Shadow, but this time, draw his face. Can you do that?" She looked at him, and in her eyes, he saw not only fear, but also a timid resolve. She nodded. He left her with Dr. Reed and drove straight to the Major Crimes Unit, directly to Captain Thorne. The captain met him coldly. "Hayes, I warned you." "Captain, I didn't come here as a detective, but as a guardian," Eli said, placing the cufflink in an evidence bag, and Mr. Jenkins's statement on the desk. "And as a witness. I have proof that Detective Sterling is involved in the murder of the Jennings family." Thorne skeptically took the cufflink and read the statement. His face slowly changed. "This is serious." "More than serious. The main witness is my daughter. Her memory is returning, and she's ready to identify the killer." The captain was silent for a long time, drumming his fingers on the desk. "All right, Hayes. I'll give you 24 hours. Find me irrefutable evidence, direct witness testimony, a confession, anything. But if this is another one of your fantasies, you'll have only yourself to blame." Eli left the office, feeling the rush of adrenaline. The countdown had begun. He knew Dev was already aware of his actions. The guard had surely reported the statement. Now his friend had turned into a cornered animal. And a cornered animal is the most dangerous kind. He drove home, constantly checking his rearview mirror. No one was following him, but the feeling of being watched never left. He understood that his apartment was no longer a safe place. He stopped at a small convenience store and bought a burner phone. He used it to call Dev. "It's me," he said when his friend answered. "Eli, what are these games? Why aren't you answering your calls?" "We need to meet, Dev, urgently. I know what happened 10 years ago. I know everything." A heavy silence hung on the other end of the line. "Where?" Dev finally asked hoarsely. "Tomorrow at noon, at the old brick factory out of town. Come alone. It's a trap." "It's your only chance," Eli cut him off. "A chance to explain everything before they come for you." He hung up. The location was chosen deliberately. An abandoned factory, a labyrinth of workshops and corridors, the perfect place for a final showdown. He wasn't planning an ambush with a tactical team. He wanted to look the man who had betrayed him in the eyes and hear the truth from him. He stood on the verge of the biggest discovery of his life, and only a few hours and one extremely dangerous step separated him from that discovery. Eli spent the night before the meeting in a cheap motel on the outskirts of town. He didn't sleep, sitting in an armchair by the window, watching the lights of the night highway. In his head, he repeatedly rehearsed the details of his plan. He knew he was taking a huge risk. Dev might not come alone. He might try to kill him. But there was no other way. To get a confession, he had to force him to talk. And for that, he needed bait. Bait he couldn't refuse. In the morning, he stopped by Dr. Reed's office. The psychologist greeted him with worry in her eyes. "She was drawing all night," she said, leading him into the office. "Barely slept." Maya was sitting at the table, a stack of papers before her. She looked up at Eli, and he saw in her eyes what he had never seen before: strength. She handed him a single sheet. It was a portrait, incredibly accurate, vibrant, rendered with almost photographic detail. The face of Devin Sterling, but not the Dev everyone knew, the smiling, charming one. This was the face of a beast at the moment of attack, with features contorted in fury, teeth bared, and on his cheek a fresh bloody scar from the blow Andre Jennings had apparently managed to land before he died. "Thank you, baby girl," Eli whispered, feeling tears well up. "You did everything right. Now it all ends." He took the drawing. This was the bait. By noon, he was at the abandoned factory. The brick buildings with broken windows resembled the skeletons of prehistoric monsters. Eli chose the largest warehouse, cluttered with broken old equipment. He attached a miniature voice recorder that Thorne had given him to his clothing. It was the captain's only condition. Dev arrived exactly at 12:01, just as they agreed. He stepped out of his car, tall, self-assured, in an expensive suit that looked ridiculous against the backdrop of the ruin. "What's with the drama, Eli?" he asked, stopping 10 feet away. "I wanted to hear it from you," Eli said, meeting his eyes. "Why, Dev? We were like brothers." Dev smirked. "Brothers? Don't make me laugh. You were always too straight, too honest, just like your dad. And I wanted to live well. And Jennings, he gave me that chance." "What were you doing with him?" "Business," Dev shrugged. "Standard 90s business. He built, I covered. We laundered money through his firm. Everything was great until he decided to quit. Said he wanted to live straight for his family. Naive fool. He was going to turn me and all our partners in." "And you killed him?" Eli's voice was even, devoid of emotion. "I didn't have a choice," Dev grimaced. "He asked for it. He started threatening me. I went over there that evening to talk, to convince him, but he started a fight. I had to quiet him down, for good." "And his wife? His son? What were they guilty of?" "Witnesses," Dev answered coldly. "Extra witnesses. They weren't supposed to be home." Eli listened, feeling everything inside him turn cold from this icy, casual cynicism. Standing before him wasn't a man, but a monster in human form. "And Maya?" he asked. "Why didn't you touch her?" "I didn't know she was there," Dev frowned. "I saw her later, after it was all done. She was lying under the bed, not breathing. I thought she was dead from fear, and I couldn't." Something wavered in his voice. "I had a daughter born around that time myself. I looked at Maya, and I couldn't do it. I decided if she survived, it would be a sign that I'd gotten away with everything." "You were wrong," Eli said. He took Maya's drawing from his pocket. "She remembers everything." He held the sheet out to Dev. Dev took the drawing, and his face changed. The confidence vanished, replaced by a superstitious horror. He stared at his own portrait, drawn by the hand of the child he had spared, and seemed to see a ghost. She couldn't have," he whispered. "She could," Eli said. "For 10 years, she was silent, but her memory kept everything, every look, every movement, and that scar." He jabbed his finger at the drawing. "Jennings got you, didn't he?" "Yeah." Dev involuntarily touched his cheek. Beneath the layer of expensive cream, a thin, barely noticeable scar, the one he usually masked, was visible. This is impossible. It's over now, Dev. Dev suddenly recoiled. A bestial fury flashed in his eyes. No, it's not over, he screamed, pulling a pistol from under his jacket. You'll die here, just like they did. And no one will ever know the truth. He leveled the gun at Eli. At that moment, a dry click echoed from behind a rusty column. Drop the weapons, Sterling! Captain Thorne's voice boomed like thunder in a clear sky. You're surrounded. Tactical officers emerged from behind cover. Dev looked around, bewildered, his face contorted with rage and helplessness. He knew he had lost. Eli looked at his former friend, and in his soul there was no malice or satisfaction, only immeasurable weariness and sorrow. He stood frozen, looking at the man who had been his brother and turned out to be his worst enemy, and the full horror of the betrayal, stretched over 10 long years, crashed down on him with a new, devastating force. Dev froze for a moment. His gaze darted from Eli to the tactical officers, as if searching for an escape from the deadly trap. Then, with a scream of desperation and fury, he turned and bolted deeper into the abandoned warehouse. Hold it! I'll shoot, Thorne yelled. But Dev wasn't listening. He weaved between the machines, knocking over crates, trying to disappear into the gloom of the massive space. Eli, without waiting for a command, dashed after him. This was his case, and he had to finish it himself. He ran, leaping over debris. His heart pounded in sync with the hollow echo of his footsteps. He saw Dev's figure flashing ahead, seemingly knowing the factory like the back of his hand. The chase led them to the second floor, onto a narrow metal walkway under the roof. Below, the floor of the warehouse yawned blackly. Dev stopped near the rusted railing, breathing heavily. Don't come closer, Eli, he yelled, leveling the pistol again. I'll jump. Don't be foolish, Dev. Eli slowly approached, keeping his own gun trained on him. You can't escape. I don't care anymore. His voice cracked with hysterical laughter. It's over. But you won't get your triumph either. You won't see me behind bars. I don't want triumph, Eli said quietly, stopping a few feet away. I want to know why you helped me with Maya. Why you played the friend all these years. You could have just disappeared. I couldn't. Dev ran his free hand over his face. I had to be close. Control the situation. Make sure she never remembered. He stumbled. Somewhere deep down, I felt sorry for her, and for you. I watched you suffer, and part of me wanted you to find out everything, for this nightmare to finally end. As he spoke, Eli saw not a cold-blooded killer, but a broken, confused man, being devoured from the inside by his own crime. Drop the gun, Dev. Let's end this with some dignity. No, he shook his head. It's already over for me. With those words, he took a step back, straight into the void. Eli rushed forward, managing to grab his arm at the last moment. Dev hung over the chasm. His body was heavy. He frantically tried to break free. Let go, he gasped. Let go, I said. No. Eli strained every muscle, holding onto him. You're going to live, Dev. You're going to live and remember what you did every single day. That will be your punishment. The arriving officers helped haul him back onto the walkway. Dev lay on the cold metal, sobbing like a child, helplessly, shamefully, without any pretense of dignity. Eli looked down at him, and his anger was replaced by a strange, heavy emptiness. Justice had prevailed, but the victory was bitter as wormwood. The trial of Devin Sterling was closed to the public. Too many high-profile names surfaced during the investigation. An entire criminal network he had covered up while in cahoots with Jennings. Dev received a life sentence. His testimony helped arrest several other powerful officials and businessmen. The Jennings case was officially closed. Eli was reinstated to his post. They even wanted to present him with an award, but he refused. "I was just doing my job," he told Captain Thorne. 10 years late. He submitted his letter of resignation. "Are you sure?" the captain asked, who had come to deeply respect him over time. "You're one of the best." "I have a different job now," Eli smiled. "The most important one in the world, being a father." Maya slowly returned to life. After Dev's arrest, she started speaking, quietly and uncertainly at first, then more boldly. She told Dr. Reed about her memories, about that terrifying night, extracting one detail after another from the depths of her mind. It was hard, painful work, but with every session, she felt lighter. The wall of silence she had built around herself was crumbling brick by brick. She and Eli moved out of the city to a small house by the lake, which he bought with the money from selling his apartment. He wanted to take her away from the noise, the hustle, the places that might remind her of the past. Here, among the pine trees and the quiet, they learned to be a family again. He taught her to fish. She taught him to laugh at silly jokes. They walked a lot, talking about everything under the sun, filling the 10-year gap of silence. One day, sitting by the lake, Maya asked, "Pop, why didn't you just leave me in foster care back then?" Eli was silent for a long time, looking at the water. "Because when I found you under that bed, I saw not only terror in your eyes, but also incredible strength," he answered. "The strength to live despite everything. And I knew I didn't have the right to walk away, that you were my chance." A chance for what? A chance to fix at least one injustice in this world, and to become something more than just a detective, to become a father. She rested her head on his shoulder. For the first time in many years, she felt completely safe. The shadow was gone forever. A year passed. Autumn painted the woods around their home gold and crimson. The air was crisp and clear, smelling of pine and decaying leaves. Eli sat on the porch, watching 16-year-old Maya laugh as she chased the puppy they had recently adopted. She had changed beyond recognition. The awkward, withdrawn teenager had transformed into a beautiful, confident young woman. The sorrow was gone from her eyes, replaced by a lively interest in the world. She still saw Dr. Reed, but now they were more like friendly conversations than therapy sessions. After everything that happened, Maya decided to become a psychologist. "I want to help kids just like me," she told Eli one day. "The ones who lost their voices from fear and pain. I know how to give it back to them." Eli looked at her with pride. The circle had closed. The pain she had endured hadn't broken her. It had turned into a source of strength, a desire to help others. He no longer worked in law enforcement, but his experience and knowledge were not wasted. He opened a small private detective agency, specializing in finding missing persons. He didn't look for criminals. He looked for hope for those who had lost it. Sometimes Dr. Reed would visit them. The three of them would sit on the porch, drinking tea with honey and talking about life. "You know, I was on the brink myself back then," the psychologist confessed one time. "Professional burnout. I felt like I couldn't help anyone anymore. But your story, it restored my faith in my work, in the fact that even from the darkest abyss, a person can be pulled out." Eli smiled. He remembered how desperately he had sought help, and how this wise woman had become a lifesaver for him and Maya. One day, the mail carrier brought a letter. It was from the maximum security prison, from Dev. Eli hesitated to open it for a long time. He gave it to Maya. "You have to decide whether to read it or not." That evening, she came to him with the open envelope. "He's asking for forgiveness," she said quietly. "He writes that he sees my parents in his dreams every day, that he repents." "And do you believe him?" Eli asked cautiously. Maya shook her head. I don't know. And maybe it doesn't matter anymore. I can't forgive him. Not yet. But I don't feel hate anymore. Just emptiness and pity. She tossed the letter into the fire, crackling in the fireplace. The past needs to stay in the past, she said, watching the paper turn to ash. We have the present now. They stood by the window, embracing, looking up at the starry sky. Life continued. Not perfect, with scars and losses, but real. Eli understood that 10 years ago, by adopting a silent girl, he had saved not only her, but also himself. She had filled his empty life with meaning, taught him to love, to forgive, and to believe that even after the darkest night, the sun will always rise. Maya, leaning against him, felt the same. This stern, quiet man had become more than just an adoptive father. He had become her fortress, her anchor, her light in the darkness. Together, they had walked through hell and emerged different, not broken, but tempered. They had become a family, forged not by blood, but by love, loyalty, and a shared victory over evil. Did you like my story? If you listened till the end, drop a number 1 in the comments. If you enjoyed it, you can support me by liking the video and sending a small tip. I've got lots of other life stories like this on my channel, so make sure to subscribe and check them out. I've added 2 new stories on screen that everyone loves. Thanks for being here. See you in the next one, with love.